Let's go ahead and get started. Good morning. Thank you everyone for joining us. For this session, Summit is proud to partner with Neuberger Berman. Today's topic is anticipating the unexpected. When it comes to your finances and investments, it is important to make sure that you are prepared for life's unexpected events. Today, our panelists, Karen Drancik and Kaci Skidgel, will cover the many ways to prepare for life's biggest obstacles. Now, we do have the Q&A feature available, so you can submit questions through that option. If there's time at the end of the session today, we will get those questions addressed. You can also submit any questions to us via email. Our email address is marketing@yoursummit.com, and I will display that email address again near the end of our session today. So let's get started. We have two panelists joining us today. Our first guest is Karen Drancik. Karen is the Senior Vice President and the Business Development Advisor with the Neuberger Berman Advisor Institute. Previously, Karen was Regional Vice President and Alternative Investment Specialist at Evergreen Investments, where she sold hedge fund of funds, private equity, and managed futures and commodities funds. Karen has over 20 years of portfolio management and sales experience with firms such as Wells Fargo and Bank of America Capital Management. Our next panelist is Kaci Skidgel. Kaci is the president of Retirement Plans for Summit. She is the author of the book Path to the Summit: Strategies to Reach Your Company's Peak Retirement. And she was acknowledged as one of the top women advisors by National Association of Plan Advisors for 6 consecutive years, and more recently named by Financial Times as one of the top financial advisors. And with that, I will pass this off to Kaci to begin today's session.
Well, thank you. And thanks everyone for taking the time to join us today. Just like each of you, I'm very excited for you all to get to hear Karen. We want to thank again our partners at Neuberger Berman. I really truly believe this is such an important topic for all of our clients, and something that we feel like is often overlooked by many people because they just aren't planning. And I've heard this saying quite a bit before, the phrase, if you fail to plan, then you're planning to fail. And so I really believe that this is something that Karen and Neuberger Berman has just hit it out of the ballpark with. Love this session, and I'm so excited to share it with you. I found it both from a personal standpoint and a professional standpoint, and hearing from others speak about this. Even in the midst of the pandemic, we're hearing about this. As Summit is an employee benefits firm, this has just been top of mind for people. So we know that if you are not equipped, we want to give you some tools today in order to help you either expand upon the knowledge that you already have, or continue to build or start, even if it is from the foundation. And I know that at times as we meet with clients, we know this can be a challenge for you. We know that families are tough at times, and there can be stress whenever a loved one passes away. But you know, I have a great story, and Karen and I, as we were preparing for today, I let her know we've been so blessed at Summit with the employees that we have. And we had a former employee who passed away a few years ago. I'd gone to high school actually with one of his daughters, and 2 days after he passed, his daughter called and asked me to join their siblings as they started talking about their family. And for him, he didn't live an extravagant lifestyle, but he worked up until almost his passing in his 80s. And he had done a great job of organizing for his kids, his bank accounts, his assets, his life insurance. And I had the honor that day and as I was telling you, Karen, I had the honor that day, instead of talking about like all this tough stuff, it was really, there was a book that was laid out for his kiddos, and they knew about it. And they went through, and so instead of talking about, you know, where did he keep his money and what was he going to do about his financial picture, it was more about telling those sweet memories and stories and getting to have that opportunity to talk about really his legacy and the funny stories that he would tell all of us. And so really that's our goal for each of you today that's on this call as our clients. We want you to know that there are resources to help you to get started. And so with that, really, Karen, I know we'll have some Q&A at the end, and I'm sure if you all have anything that you want to add, please don't hesitate to put it in the box at the bottom. We will make sure that we try to get to your questions. But Karen, I'm going to pass it over to you. And I just want to say thank you again to you and Mark for allowing this to be shared with our clients.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Kaci. Hang on just a second. Let me pull up my content here.
Sure.
For some reason, that's not coming up. Okay, so let me go to Plan B. Hold on. Done. It will come up eventually. Copy to Zoom. Okay, here we go. All right. More than one way to skin a cat, as my grandmother used to say. Good Lord, us Southerners certainly have a lot of those sayings. It makes my husband nuts. Good morning, everybody. Don't pay attention to the date that's on this. I just realized that we forgot to change the date on it. It is not July 17th. Thank goodness we are a little bit further in on that. My name is Karen Drancik, and I work for a group at Neuberger Berman called our Neuberger Berman Advisor Institute. And we have quite a few programs, but the one thing that I wanted to highlight here is that my partner and I, Sherry Brooks, collectively have close to 55 years of experience in the financial services business. Sherry has tended to specialize more on the asset management side of the business, and my background that will inform my presentation today, I spent 13 years working in a bank trust department, working with families at that time when they have lost their loved ones. And by way of introduction, I also recently just lost my mother. And I am dealing with a lot of the things that I'm going to be talking about today. It certainly will inform what I'm talking about. The first piece that I want to talk about today is something called anticipating the unexpected. It is an electronic booklet and checklist that is prepared to help multiple generations in a family. So adult parents, adult children, grandchildren, etc. It's geared towards helping you have a conversation around a lot of different subjects. Certainly around everything that you own and where it's going to go, but also it's geared towards helping everyone, like Kaci said, get all of that stuff out of the way so the more meaningful conversations can be had around things like philanthropy and family history and family stories. And what this piece literally does talks about three, I like to call them the three buckets. And they are, it's kind of hard to see here, what you have, where is it all located, and who do you contact with respect to each one of those things. When someone passes away, the first thing, and it's certainly what I'm dealing with right now, is, once the services have been held and everyone gets down to the brass tacks of settling an estate, it becomes, where is everything? Some people have a checklist, some people don't. And it becomes the ultimate treasure hunt, literally. And you want to prevent that as much as you can. It's identifying everything that you have, where do mom and dad locate it, and then who do you pick up the phone and call to deal with it? Not just about the stuff, but also about the estate planning things. The big thing here in my family, we had a checklist, and the one item that we couldn't find was mom's punch bowl. And we knew she had it. We knew it was in this house because it was moved in here a year and a half ago, but for the life of us, we couldn't find it. And of course, the last thing we did was empty out the garage, and it was hidden inside a grocery cart that my mother had in the back of the garage, stuffed down at the bottom full of tissue paper. Lo and behold, she didn't tell us where it was ahead of time. All right, this piece is something that was created a little over 10 years ago when I came to Neuberger. And it was the direct result of having a conversation with clients, specifically a young widowed client, a lady that was 38 years old who had been to see her estate planning attorney with her husband. They drafted documents. They had a buy-sell agreement executed, or was going to be executed, for the sale of her husband's business. All of their estate planning documents were in draft form. The attorney messengered them over to their house. Husband came home on a Friday night. They were sitting on the table in the front entryway. He said, "Oh, good, we'll deal with that tomorrow." He got up the next morning, went for a 6 o'clock morning run, and was struck and killed by a drunk driver. All of those documents went unexecuted. He basically died intestate. And she said it wasn't so much the legal hassle that she had to deal with respect to a lot of the stuff. She said she just ended up not knowing anything. She didn't know everything that they owned. She didn't know who to call even. And in the middle of all of it, she's trying to also deal with 4 grieving children. So she actually passed out a little sheet that she came up with called What I Wish I Would Have Known. And we took that and blew it up and created something called Anticipating the Unexpected. Now, the first part of building the plan is obviously putting together the blocks that go in the plan. And in this plan, you're going to be talking about things like everything that you own and everything that you owe. So your assets, your liabilities. If you have investments, where are they? How are they managed? What are the objectives for those? Retirement needs. What is your goal? What do you want to do in retirement? Annuity and life insurance information is huge. This was one thing that was a little bit of a surprise for me with my mom. I knew that she'd had a life insurance policy that she cashed out, but I was surprised to find out she actually had another one. Life insurance in particular is a really important thing to discuss ahead of time with the family, because the burden of proof is going to be upon the beneficiaries to prove that you had a policy to take it to the insurance companies. Insurance companies have a great gig going. They've got over $1 billion in unclaimed proceeds at any given time, and they are just waiting for the phone call to get that money to send out. But they won't send it until the beneficiaries call and say, hey, my mom and dad had a policy. The burden of proof is going to be upon you to provide that information to your family members. And something like an Anticipating the Unexpected tool prepared ahead of time is something that's going to give them that information. It's also going to talk about long-term care needs. Do you have those plans in place? Have you purchased policies? Or are you going to self-fund those plans? Where are your healthcare, your medical insurance information and healthcare powers of attorney? So people know that if you are incapacitated, who's going to be doing the decision-making with respect to all of your medical needs. So that's in a nutshell what this brochure covers. It's something that I tell everyone, if you break it down into a few separate pieces, it's going to make it easier to fill out. I always say, take everything that requires a statement. So your checking account, your savings account, any CDs you might have, investment accounts, annuities, your 401k plan, your IRA, everything, your credit card statements, your mortgage statements. Think of it in terms of anything you get a statement for. What you're going to be doing is telling your loved ones where to find all that information. And on those statements, they will find the contact information for the person at that institution that they will be picking up the phone and calling to deal with those assets upon your demise. The second bucket, however, is going to be about your estate plan. So do you have a will? Do you have a trust, perhaps? Some states are more probate friendly than others. The least probate friendly states, most clients end up having something called a living trust. Do you have a living will or a healthcare power of attorney? Who is your healthcare proxy? Do you want to donate your organs? Any funeral or pre-needs that you've already purchased? Or what are your final wishes? Do you want to be buried? Do you want to be cremated? Do you want to have your ashes flown into outer space? That is an option, believe it or not. And if you have small children, what are your plans for someone taking care of them? Have you named a guardian? Or have you named someone else who will serve in that capacity to make sure that maybe your older young children are going to be taken care of? So all of these things are going to be going into your plan. And I highly recommend that this be something that you review on a regular basis, I say once a year at a given time when you know you're going to be pulling out a lot of your financial information, and that's going to be when you do your taxes. So if you are an April the 15th filer, then at, April the 1st, you're going to pull out your information in your anticipating the unexpected plan and start reviewing that also. Not only just you, but reviewing it with your family and working with your financial advisor. Okay, now I've already talked about high level, but now I want to get into a little bit of the details that, like they say, the devil is in the details, to make sure your family members know everything that you've gotten. This is just a laundry list that we've come up with. You may come up with a few more things, but we think that in general, these are the things that you're going to want to go over and find first. And not just find them, but understanding how they're titled. So for your assets, if you own your home, if you own it outright, where's the title in the deed? Again, how is it titled? Is it titled in the name of your living trust if you have one, or is it just titled joint tenants in common, or if you are the sole owner? All of your investments, if you have multiple accounts, make sure everyone knows where those multiple advisors are located. If you have retirement assets at your current employer, make sure that they know who runs the 401k plan and who is the contact at your company that they can get a hold of with respect to your retirement plan assets. If you own other real estate, where are titles and deeds? If you own your own business, very big information. How is the business titled? Is there a buy-sell agreement that's around that will be executed upon your demise to effect a sale? If you own significant art or antiques, or anything else of value like a collection, stamps, coins, watches, all jewelry, significant jewelry. This is your loved ones need to know where each and every one of these items is located. With respect to everything that you owe, usually by the time we come to the end of our life, we don't owe nearly as much as we do at the very beginning, but we still have a few odds and ends. The important thing here is to make an inventory of who you have to pay every month. So household expenses, the mortgage, the car payment, the credit card payments, the electric bill, the power bill, the water bill. If you have life insurance policies, the big thing for all of these things is who do you owe, when are the payments due, and how do you make the payments? Because immediately after someone passes away, a lot of these items still need to be paid for on an ongoing basis until the estate is settled and any real estate or homes are sold. So it's really important to provide this information. I already covered insurance policies. The burden of proof is going to be upon you to let your loved ones know all the policies that you have, but also of critical importance is understanding how much is the coverage for and how much is the premium and how do you make the premium payment. I work with this situation quite frequently, and one of the horror stories that I always like to share is about a family from Florida. They were from Connecticut. Mom and dad moved to Florida. Mom and dad had only been in Florida for a very short time before the wife passed away of cancer. And the two sons that were left in Connecticut decided to go down and get dad, help him sell his house, pack up all his belongings, close everything out, and move him back home to Connecticut. And before the first year was out back in Connecticut, their father also passed away. And the boys went to go cash the $500,000 life insurance policy that dad had been paying on for forever, only to be very disappointed to find out that the policy had lapsed about a year previously. And the reason that it had lapsed was because when the boys closed out their father's checking account, they had stopped the auto debit that paid for the premiums on the life insurance policy. A very tiny little detail that made $500,000 go away that their father certainly wanted them to have. So again, these are the tiny little details that can become critically important to your loved ones down the road. Employee benefits, if any benefits that you have accrue to your spouse upon your demise. Make sure that those are listed somewhere. And lastly, talking about your final wishes. My father referred to this section as planning your own demise. Certainly it talks about the distribution of all of your stuff upon your demise. And I'm not just talking about the big stuff, but a lot of the little stuff as well. And trust me when I tell you that my experience will bear this out. Children will fight over the least consequential thing possible. In my family, and we just went through this 3 days ago, the one thing that we are fighting over is a $2.50 Christmas ornament that my mother gave the 3 older children when we were very small. We managed to get around it, and we managed to figure out a way that it's going to make everybody happy. But start thinking about those personal and sentimental items and who you're going to leave them to. For the ladies, it's your jewelry. And it's not just the expensive stuff, but also some of the costume jewelry that has a story that's attached to it. For the gentlemen, watches, wedding ring, any artwork, antiques, etc. Make sure all of those things are labeled so that everyone knows who they'll be going to upon your demise. Also, make sure that your loved ones know the provisions of your will, who things are going to be going to, in what proportion, any funeral arrangements that you've made. Is there a specified funeral home that you want to work with? Do you want to be buried or cremated? This again can become a bone of contention amongst family members and heirs, because if you don't spell it out, people have different opinions about what they say that you wanted or had mentioned previously. This came to bite us when my father passed away 8 years ago. He told me and one of my siblings that he wanted to be cremated, and yet my mother found a very old letter that said my father wanted to be buried. My father had actually changed his mind when the Catholic Church said that we were allowed to be cremated, and my mother didn't know that. And ultimately, we allowed my mother to bury my father in a military cemetery in Knoxville, Tennessee. So just make sure that people know and understand what your final wishes are. Additionally, all of your estate planning documents, what your loved ones need to know is where are the originals for these documents, your last will and testament, your living will, your living trust, your healthcare powers of attorney, durable powers of attorney. They're not valid once you've passed away, but during your lifetime, if you are incapacitated in any way and can no longer handle your affairs, powers of attorney will become very important, because they are the one thing that will stand between you and any guardianship proceedings. And trust me when I tell you, you want to avoid that at all costs, because they are very expensive and very messy, and they are very easy to avoid by having something called a durable power of attorney prepared ahead of time. It just means that you're giving someone, forgive me, the authority to deal with your affairs as if you would do that. And it allows them to pay your bills, enact financial transactions, buying and selling a property, etc. The other thing too, is making sure everyone knows who is the executor for your estate. Do you have one or do you have multiples? Does each one have a specific role to play, or do you want them to both generally cover that information? I already talked about funeral arrangements, arrangements for minor children, again, for guardianship there. Other documents that are going to become necessary, deeds to your home and any other property, previous year's tax returns can become very important investigative tools for finding lost assets. Your kids can literally go back through your previous year's taxes to find out if you sold property. Also, they want to know the last time you filed your federal income tax return, your 1040, because dying doesn't get you out of your obligation to pay your 1040 for the year that you've passed away. Birth certificates for you, your spouse, and your children. If a spouse is predeceased, you also need the buried in the cemetery as mother. Military discharge paper, people in the armed forces in this country, any frequent flyer miles or hotel points or credit card points. They are actually usable and transferable upon someone's demise. I jokingly say that when I'm dead and gone, the one thing that my kids are going to be fighting over is my American Airlines account and my Hyatt hotel points, because it's paid for their vacations ever since they've been very little. And then any other, what I like to call social, fraternal, or other beneficial organizations that you may have been a membership to that will provide honors at your funeral. If you have a safe deposit box, this can also be a big bone of contention. Where is the box? Again, is it located in the state where you are currently residing? That often becomes an issue because people tend to downsize and move out of state and forget that they have a box at a previous institution. How is the box titled so that someone can get in it upon your demise? And where is the key? Finding the key is a big deal because, again, if you've moved a few times before your passing, things get thrown away and they may not be able to find the keys to your current safe deposit box. Okay, that's all the details. Now, I would keep all of this in this brochure once you've printed it off. Tell your loved ones where this document is located, which begs the question, where should you keep it? I would highly recommend that you keep it at home, somewhere in a safe place that is both fireproof and floodproof. So if that's a lockbox or if it's a safe that has a combination on it, I would keep it there and make sure whoever is the executor for the estate has the combination or the key that will get into that specific lockbox. I also highly recommend that a copy of it be made to give to a few of what I like to call your close inner circle or your circle of advisors, your financial advisor, your estate planning attorney, and your accountant. If you are comfortable sharing this information, it's a good idea to leave a copy with them as well, because these are the people that your loved ones are going to be working with to settle your estate when the time comes. Also, if you are so inclined to share the information with your children ahead of time, I highly encourage it. The good news is that you're not putting any dollar amounts in this brochure or this tool right now. All you're telling your loved ones is where that information is located when they need to go get it. So it's not going to provide a disincentive to your loved ones by letting them know how much is there when the time comes. It's just a function of saying, these are the documents that you're going to need to go find, and here's where they are located. I would certainly, if you're comfortable, let your kids know ahead of time that this is what they're going to be using when the time comes. Okay, now inside of this little brochure is also a separate piece called a surviving spouse checklist. Now, surviving spouse is a bit of a misnomer. We're contemplating retitling this, but it's gotten such a following, we're almost afraid to change it. It can be used in the event of anyone's passing. And what it is a 12-month guide that will help the family get from the day after someone's passed away to the filing of the federal estate tax return, which is due within 9 months of your passing. And literally it walks them through on a timeline, those activities and those deeds or chores that are going to have to be done after someone passes away. It tells them who's going to need to be notified and what are the documents that are going to be needed either to be filed somewhere, whether it's with the state or with an attorney, or whether it's with the municipality or an insurance company, et cetera. All of those documents that are going to be needed in that specific time frame. So the first week, the family is going to be gathering all of the documents that are going to need to be filed with the probate court or with the attorney for a trust, if there is one. The life insurance policy that's going to need to be filed with the life insurance company. The title of the home, if it's going to need to be sold. Again, it goes through all the list of all those documents that are going to be needed. And it tells you things to look for, like, is there a safe deposit box? And if so, where is it? That's the first week. Weeks 2 to 4, a little bit different information. Who else is going to need to be notified? And again, what are the documents that are going to be needed at that time? All the way through the first 6 months, talking about planning for taxes, talking about the distribution of a lot of the items that are going to go to the children, starting to prepare the federal estate tax return, and then getting to that 9-month mark and closing in on that 1-year mark, have the estate valued, file the federal estate tax return, and then hold a final family meeting to distribute everything else that's remaining that needs to be distributed. So this can be used, again, I say, for anyone who's passed away. It will be available to you electronically, so you will be able to share it. Now, the last thing that we're going to provide you is something that I like to call a family checkup tool. I liken this to when you go to the doctor and you walk into the office, the first thing that you do is you check in at the front desk and they give you a clipboard. And it has you go through, all kinds of possible things that could have possibly happened to you in the time frame since you've seen the doctor last. It makes you go through your medical history, and then it asks you, why are you here today? What do you want to talk to the doctor about? Well, this is something called a life events checklist. And what it does is list a lot of different everyday life events that happen to us during the course of our lives, that we might not necessarily associate with having financial consequences, but they do. And it will tell you that these are some things that you are probably going to want to contact your financial advisor and or your estate planning attorney when these events happen. It's just a jumping off place for having future conversations with your financial advisor, with your estate planning attorney, your tax professional, and then ultimately with your family members. So this is just a little thing to have around that anytime something happens, check it off, bring it with you when you go to see your financial advisor so that you know to talk about those things, to find out what are the ramifications and any changes or adjustments to planning that might need to be done. Okay. I am going to turn this back over. Let's see, I'm going to stop sharing this. Hold on. To Kaci and to Megan to see if we have any questions.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you, Karen. And really, gosh, I mean, I was sitting taking copious notes as you were going through the information, because I think there are so many things that our clients, as you start, your brain just starts to think, oh, have I done this? Oh, have I taken care of this? I will tell you, you made me laugh when you told me that I could fly my ashes to outer space. I don't know. I'm looking at the list of attendees today. I don't know, but I'll be excited to hear from some of our clients who tell me that that might be something that they're wanting to do. I hope that they're saving a lot of money if that's the case. But one of the things, Karen, that popped up, what about passwords? Because you mentioned hotel points and unused points, and this actually comes up quite a bit. I know you mentioned, you should be saving the things, but what are families doing for that piece of it?
And thank you for reminding me, because it is something that I forgot to mention. One of the most important things that you are going to communicate to your loved ones ahead of time is usernames and passwords, not only for all of the accounts that you have. So not just for, your checking account, your savings account, and, how to get into your credit card statement, so to speak, but it's also the usernames and the passwords for all your electronic devices. So your smartphone, your tablet, your desktop computer, your laptop computer, because you keep a lot of really valuable information in those devices.
Right.
And everybody's going to need to get in to get the information out, which also brings me to one more thing that I haven't normally talked about, but it actually hit my family this week. my brother were in my mom's house for a week trying to, distribute all of her stuff and get it cleaned up to sell it. And my brother panically, is yelling at me from another room, "What is the password to mom's Wi-Fi?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I mean, I've been at her house before and I logged in like 2 years ago, so it recognizes me. I can't remember it." And I'm like, "Hold on a minute. Mom had a little password book for all of her accounts. And fortunately, she listed the Xfinity Wi-Fi and what the password is to get onto the Wi-Fi." So these are the little things that ultimately will make people crazy if they don't have the info. So thank you for reminding me that it's really important.
Yeah, no, and I just think that's something that we always consider, that we think about quite a bit, because I know that you're not necessarily thinking of, well, I'm going to have to get into their personal information. So appreciate you sharing that. One of the things that you talked about, Karen, and it kind of came up here, and I just add a comment, you've given a lot of different resources that Neuberger has. And so you all that are on the call as our clients, we want to get each of these in your hands. And so if all you need to do in order to do that, Megan will put up at the end, marketing@yoursummit.com. Of course, you can reach out to one of us. But I would also say, if you want to put it in the Q&A, just name and email address, we will make sure that you get copies of all these, the family checklist, the surviving spouse checklist, all of these things just to help you. And something that's been coming up for us more and more, we've been doing some planning with a client specifically, and it is very realistic. And I read the stats all the time, Karen, of people have usually 4 to 5 advisors.
Yep.
It's just kind of because the average person works at 8 different companies during their lifetime. So over the course of time, you might have 4 or 5 different 401ks and things like that.
Yep.
But one of the things that's really important is that you're looking at that full financial plan. And so I know that that's been something that we've been blessed with our clients to get to go through. And as an employee benefits firm, you talked quite a bit about the life insurance piece pairing together with the investments piece of it. And so we just want our clients to know that we do believe that you should be bringing all of those people together to help you. That's your CPA, that's your attorney. When you're doing planning, it's all of those people are all your trusted advisors. So I think that that's just an important piece of it, is get those people on the same page in order to better help you, and do it now instead of waiting. But Karen, I appreciated you mentioning, like, if they have those people's names and numbers written down. What I always think of, when's the good time to do this? You said right around tax time, and just something that popped into my mind as we're talking. Right now, we're in November. We're in the month of Thanksgiving, right? And thankfulness, which usually means you're getting together with your family. You're getting together with your close friends. And that's why it's my absolute favorite holiday of the year. But what I would suggest is start those conversations, because I think what I find, and what we as an organization find, is the hardest part is actually having that initial conversation. So who do you suggest, Karen, who should they be sharing this with? Who should they be talking about it?
Like I said, if you are so inclined and you want to share it with your entire family, meaning anyone who is potentially an heir to the estate, it's good to do that. But at a bare minimum, I would say you need to share it with whomever is named executor for the estate, because they're the ones that are going to have to pick up this ball and run with it right away. And that might be one person. It might be more than one. My mother named my brother and I executor. So there are 2 of us. We have a copy of her information, and we're both running from the same playbook, so to speak. And it's making our lives a whole lot easier because he has all the same information that I do. I also say, if your financial advisor, if you are comfortable, share it with your financial advisor. My mom's financial advisor, I have met on multiple occasions. So he's got the same info that I do. We're working from the same playbook. Some attorneys want this information. Others don't have the room to store it. but they do like to know that something like this exists. So even if you don't provide them a copy, let them know that there is something, and they can make a notation in their file for you that something like it does exist.
Perfect. Okay. And another question that that just came through asking about, well, it's you and your brother, right, on your estate. Is there a right or a wrong for one versus two? And how does that with friction that can often be caused by family?
Yeah.
How do you handle that?
Okay, there, and that, to me, that's two questions. Number one, how many should you name? It really is dependent on what you're looking for. I tried to talk my mother out of naming two, because I've worked with hundreds of attorneys over the course of the last 10 years, and I always ask them this question. And the response from about 95% of them is that you should name one. You should name one and then have backups or contingents, so that if that person predeceases you, or if that person, for whatever reason, isn't able to do it, there is a contingent person named. The problem with multiples, number one, if the multiples are divisible by two, meaning, so if it's 2 or 4 or whatever, and there's the possibility where there's a tie in decision making, that's problematic. Because if you have two executors and they disagree on an issue, that issue is not going to resolve until those two people agree on it. Fortunately for me, my brother and I see eye to eye on pretty much everything. So it's not going to be an issue, but that's not always going to be the case. So you have to know your kids well enough to know whether or not that's a good idea. Most attorneys will say either name one or an odd number.
Okay.
Now, if you think that there's going to be a problem with anyone in your family or any of your friends doing this, there is an option called a corporate trustee or a corporate executor. A lot of banks, a lot of financial services companies offer that as a service for their clients. You will have to pay to get the estate settled, but quite frankly, anyone who acts as an executor is allowed to take a fee for their expenses that are incurred in settling the estate. So, you might pay a little bit more, but the advantages of having a corporate trustee or executor is that they are extremely neutral, and they are going to do exactly what you want without any undue influence. So if kids are going to be fighting over something, then a corporate trustee or a corporate executor might be the route to go.
Well, I appreciate that. And we're getting a lot of great questions. And so I'm hopeful we'll keep going on with this. One of the questions, it's kind of in that same vein that it must have brought this up, but they were just saying, okay, but we have stepchildren. So ultimately, if you have stepchildren and you also have, blended families, what happens if there's issues between your own children and the stepchildren? Is that back to whoever gets named? It doesn't matter if it's the stepchild that gets named or the child that gets named. I mean, it sounds like the two spouses are going to have to communicate and make a decision.
Oh, absolutely. I'm a stepmother. So it all starts at the planning stage. When newly remarried spouses do their estate plan, this is one of the things that needs to be discussed. How are the stepchildren, in my case, to be treated? Are they to be treated as if they are natural children, meaning that when you say you want everything divided amongst your children equally, are they included? Or does each spouse have their own plan that takes care of their own children?
Okay.
And the attorney will walk you through that plan. Our estate planning attorney was actually a little bit shocked when I told her that my stepchildren are to be treated as if they are my natural children, because it doesn't happen all the time, but I don't have any natural children of my own. So, and they've been my kids since they were 8 and 9 years old. So, for all intents and purposes, but not everybody feels that way. I hate to say it, but this is one of those cases where communication is critical. especially with respect to some of the personal and the sentimental items, I would tag everything.
Okay.
Either put a sticky note on it or write on the back of things, or in the best way to control it, believe it or not, is to mention even itty bitty little things in your will, because
Okay.
that makes it legal. That
Well, you
means
said
that
the ornament. I mean, the ornament, it might only be $2.50, but everyone's wanting that. If you haven't, then it becomes a challenge for people.
Yeah. And you don't want, well, other people say too that, if you don't want the kids fighting, then you put a clause in the will that says if they contest it, then they don't get anything.
Well, we know
don't
that.
recommend, by the way, but that's what some people do because they know there are going to be arguments.
Mhm.
Stepchildren and remarriages, there are a whole host of estate planning options that will cover the gamut on how you want those things to be distributed. So I just highly recommend that you go to an estate planning attorney, not someone who does estate planning on the side, so to speak, but go to someone who specializes in estate planning to get this information sorted out. And all they really do is force you to have a communication about what it is that you want.
So one of the questions that's then coming up, someone's just saying, okay, but I'm a simple person, right? We don't have a whole bunch as a family, but what I'm hearing you say is no matter what, and so help us. Does everybody need to make sure that they get an attorney and a state attorney? Do you have any indication of how much, or can it be something where you do it independently and not through an attorney?
Okay. There are options out there to do it yourself.
Okay.
I always say that it's only going to be as good as you pay for.
Okay.
So unless you feel that you are very confident in your ability to do this, you can do something. Some states recognize something called a holographic will, which means you write your own.
Okay.
And you can certainly go on the internet and find examples of how to write your own and how to get it attested and witnessed so that it becomes a legal document.
Mhm.
Don't necessarily recommend that. I always recommend that somebody goes to an attorney. I would also say shop around for the attorney, because their fee schedules are all wildly different, and try and find one that will charge their fees on the basis of the complexity of the estate. Because
Okay.
if you have a relatively simple estate and their fee schedule is sliding, then you're not going to pay so much. So it's perfectly okay to make, exploratory conversations or phone calls to find out what everybody does and how much they charge for it. At a bare minimum, I always tell everybody, have a will, because if you don't have a will, then you die what we call intestate. And that means that the state that you live in at the time of your demise, or of the residence of your state where you die, excuse me, that state will determine where your money and your stuff is going to go. And it's in some formula of some go to a surviving spouse and some go to the children. So at a bare minimum, have that. Any other advanced documents, that's at your discretion, but I would do a will and a power of attorney.
Okay. And I've got, there's some great questions that are coming in. So another question that came through is, okay, well, how do you handle your estate, the control, the distribution, if you have two kids, one being very successful, they're making the good decisions in life, and this happens, we all know this, you probably know a family that this is happening with, and another one that maybe hasn't made those good decisions.
Okay.
How do you handle that?
Again, everybody is a little bit different. My husband and I had this very conversation with our estate planning attorney, because we have one son that's, a little more successful than the other. We have one that had a little bit of a problem launching himself into life. And my husband wanted to set up money in trust for one, so that he wouldn't get, if we died suddenly, he didn't want him to have a whole pile of money at once, but he thought it would be perfectly okay for the other one to have it. And I backed off on that. And the attorney also said, no matter what you do, you should treat them both the same. If you want your kids to love and respect each other for the rest of their natural lives, I think it's important that you treat them the same, unless there are what I like to call like drug dependency issues and things that have to be dealt with, or if there's a special need child. That's a whole separate ball of wax that needs to be planned for in and of itself. Again, it's going to be completely up to you, but there are options out there to, leave things in trust for a short period, and, until they reach the age of 30. You can set the age, if, we set half at 30 and the rest at 35. Some people make it 40. Others make it 21. Once they reach the age of majority, they can have whatever it is. So I think it's knowing and understanding your children, and, if you want them to love each other, I would say treat them the same. And that's not a legal opinion. That's a personal opinion. Absolutely.
Right. And I think, ultimately you can spend a lot of money doing this, or you can, and so what I would, what I think, some of the things that are coming to my mind based on some of these questions are, a lot of times through your employer, there are options through your benefits plans for just legal advice, and to have a certain number of hours that someone's going to help you. So here's what I would say to all of you that are on the call that are asking some of these questions. Remember that it just starts with just doing one thing. And I always tell people, whether we're doing a 401k education meeting or we're talking to a client, like, we want you just to take the first step, because this is overwhelming. I mean, I do this every day. Our teams do this every day. And I know there are places that you talked about today, Karen, that I'm like, oh, we haven't done all of these things. My husband and I, blended family. I would, a horror story for them is, his father actually passed away over 3 years ago. They are still not done closing out the estate. There were 2 executors on the account, and every year they still file the taxes. So it is one of those things that it happens more often than you want, but there are options for you with legal advice and things like that, that sometimes might be a part of your employee benefit package overall to your employees. So why not set that up for your employees and just remind them of that? Anything else to add about that one?
I think that's a great idea. And I would say it's probably one of the least used employee benefits that's out there. And if you are ever going to use it, doing your will is the one thing that I would promote when you promote that benefit. Okay. People have legal needs off and on throughout their lives, but the one thing that we all need is an estate plan. So I would readily promote that. And, I don't know if we have any participants on or not, but I don't care how old you are. If you have a job, then you should at a bare minimum have a will. Mm-hmm. And you can review it, going forward as your life circumstances change, but you should absolutely have a will. Most of us don't do it until we get to be, of a certain age and we're married and when we have kids. Yeah, but you should do it when you're younger. I will say that if you prepare this Anticipating the Unexpected brochure, and you don't have a will right now, going through this exercise will help you get your arms around everything that you've got. And it really does force you to start thinking about, where's it going to go after I'm gone? Mm-hmm. So this is a good preparation for going to see the attorney. It really, and because you're so prepared when you go, it's going to cut down on the billable hours at the attorney's office, and it's going to make doing it a little bit cheaper. So there's a real reason for doing it right there. It's going to save you some legal fees.
And that's what I would say is, as we work with our individual clients, that's what we find is part of what we feel like our planning piece of it is to help you start to pull all of that together. We believe that the best solutions come when all of your trusted advisors are working together. Ultimately, we all serve you. So when you think about that, your CPA, your attorney, your financial advisor, that's the true planning. That's the true planning that we believe actually occurs. And so we can help with some of these things. Obviously, there's some legwork, but sometimes it's just that accountability of having your financial advisor sit down, go through that with you and talk through, okay, what's the next step? Okay, then what's the next step that I'm going to take? So, I would say, I know that we're needing to close this out, but it sounds like, Karen, just based on all the questions that we're getting here and a lot of people saying that either their dad or they personally would have flown their ashes to outer space. So, gosh, somebody needs to create some way for this to happen, and we need to do it in bulk, it sounds like, so that we can get better cost for whenever we're
Really.
ready to fly these ashes to outer space.
I used to keep a file of all the unique places and things that people used to do with their remains. And that one is my all-time favorite. And there is an outfit out of New Mexico that will do it. Now, unfortunately, it will not allow you to sprinkle yourself into outer space, but it will fly your urn up into a rocket and bring them back down to Earth. So you can say you've been in outer space.
Wow. Okay, so there you have it. You heard it from Karen. It's a possibility. Yeah. I'm going to turn this back over to Megan, but I just want to say, Karen, this has been excellent. We're going to need to do this again as a follow-up. We've got lots of Q&A. If we didn't get to your answers as we were going through this today, we'll make sure that we respond back to you personally. We will be able to give, of course, all of this information to you. And what I would say is if you need more information for your employees on a personal level, we know that really we hit a lot of time, like our HR, our CFOs, our key employer contacts, but we want you to know this is available to your participants and your employees as well. That's who we serve at Summit. And so that's really important to us that anyone has this available for them. So Megan, I'm going to pass it back over to you to wrap us up. Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Mark from Neuberger Berman, for hosting this.
My pleasure.
Thank you. And I'd like to thank both of you, Karen and Kaci, for your time and sharing this incredibly valuable information with everyone today. We would like to thank all of you as well for joining us for today's session. Please be sure to also follow us on social media. And if you are interested in obtaining the information that was covered today, as Kaci had mentioned earlier, you can certainly email us at marketing@yoursummit.com. There's the email address. We will be happy to provide you with all the information that Karen covered today. We also have COVID-19 resources available on our website, so please take a look at that for more information. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. Have a fantastic rest of your day and stay safe.